Well, come on.
There's a dragon on the wire, breathing digital flames. No sound bites allowed is the name of his game. With a coffee in one hand and his puppy on his lap, cigarettes curling, smoking his political trap. Michael Vass roars through the screen, he flies, painting red and blue skies with his fiery cry. He's the world's watchdog, calling out the bluff. Right-wing swagger, but his heart's pretty tough. He's a Republican dragon with his truthful slight. Fights the battles unseen in the shadows of the night. From policy to passion, he breaks it all down, giving a voice to the voiceless, wearing his crown. Caffeine-fueled mornings, the smoke curls dance. Puppy at his feet, giving life one more chance. Through algorithms and bias, he cuts straight and clear. Michael's roar echoes in the hemisphere. Michael Vass roars through the screen, he flies, painting red and blue skies with his fiery cry. He's the world's watchdog, calling out the bluff. Right-wing swagger, but his heart's pretty tough. No sound bites allowed is his ultimate creed. A dragon's perspective where facts are the seed. Standing tall on his battlefield of thoughts, guarding the truth that others forgot. Michael Vass roars through the screen, he flies, painting red and blue skies with his fiery cry. He's the world's watchdog, calling out the bluff. Right-wing swagger, but his heart's pretty tough.
Hey, everybody, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed. I am your host, Michael Voss, and it is a hot day today in the Bronx, New York. I'm happy to be here with you. It's about 100 plus degrees where I'm at right now, where I'm broadcasting, so please excuse me a little bit relaxed, but I'm sweating a storm. But I think a lot of people are suffering in the same kind of way. As you may notice right now, our format's a little different than what we normally present. I'm using Rumble Studio at the moment, and we should be up on Rumble and YouTube and X, and it seems like we're not, that we're only up on Rumble right now. I'm not going to stop the stream. I'm going to keep going. We should be up. We're supposed to be, but it seems YouTube is pissed off at Rumble at this moment. I'll work it out later. That being said, the reason why I'm on today is because, well, the war between Israel and Iran, and more importantly, the United States, is continuing to heat up. There is even more that's going on. And I'm not going to go through a lot. We covered a lot of this yesterday, but there's new developments that deserve to be covered, and there's new fears that are going around across the internet, and I think we need to address those, to really have a conversation about that, because I think it's unfair. It's unrealistic. And I want to talk about some of those, like in particular, there's the question right now that came out earlier today that Iran, the government of Iran, have gone on to their news media, state-owned television, and said that Iran plans to kill 50,000 U.S. soldiers. Now, initially, this statement was not covered by the mainstream news media. It wasn't covered by any of the left-leaning secondary news media, the less credible sources that are sometimes true, sometimes just clickbait. And it was only on the tertiary news media that we found that this message came out. And initially, it looked like it was not realistic. as you can see, this is coming from London Loves Business, not the top political news site or political commentary site that you would be looking for to try and confirm this. And so it didn't sound very credible at the time that the Iranian state TV, presenter Mehdi Khan-Alizadeh, had come out and said that the United States president in the Oval Office chose to take delivery of of coffins of up to 50,000 U.S. soldiers. Now, that story later on did get covered by more credible news agencies. In particular, that would be the Daily Mirror out of the UK. Again, not the most credible news agency, but the fact is it started getting out into the public that, yes, Iran was threatening the United States. Yes, it was threatening our troops and American citizens around the world. But this deserves a little bit more attention because let's think about this. Iran can't do this. And that's something that a lot of the news media out there are not telling the American people. They're not sharing this reality with a lot of people, and they should. Iran is making a big bluster, and this is normal. Just like what we did yesterday is relatively normal. Let me clarify what I mean by that. It has been consistent since about 1990 that the United States and or Israel assassinate the scientists and bomb the facilities for Iran to make nuclear weapons. We've been doing this for roughly 3 decades, on and off. So that's not new. Today, what happened yesterday was significant in the scope of the damage that we did, the overall completeness of what we did, and also the actions by Israel prior to that to remove the infrastructure, both in terms of the government as well as the scientists and the military. That the scope was larger, but then again, we've never seen Iran closer to being able to have the ability to make nuclear material and nuclear weapons. We've never been this close to that no-go zone. And as we showed you yesterday, the world agrees with the United States. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. That's just something that's agreed upon, regardless of whether you're talking about Arabic states or you're talking about Europe, the United States, you name the country, nobody wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon. But nobody else in the world had the balls to step up and actually take care of that, besides Israel and the United States. And Israel, by itself, could not get the job done. Thus, the United States stepped in. And it was a surgical strike, as we have confirmed, and everyone in the world has been able to confirm and review. So we knew that Iran, as it always does after this kind of event where their scientists have been attacked, where their generals have been attacked, where their nuclear facilities have been bombed, they always then respond with they're going to attack America. That America will be burning and in flames and destroyed because Iran is the greatest nation in their own minds, essentially. But the reason why they said 50,000 Americans, to be very specific, to say that number in detail, is because they're quoting how many Americans are throughout the Middle East at various bases. So they're essentially saying that they would take out every American in Iraq, in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, in the United Arab Emirates, in Israel. Everywhere there are American bases or American soldiers, American government embassies, that they would kill all of them. That's just not realistic. One, Iran doesn't have the capability to do that, which the news media isn't really conveying to the public. They don't have the resources to do that. Two, besides that, the second most important thing, or perhaps even the more important thing, is they're going to piss off everyone in the Middle East, which, as we will discuss in a second, they are doing. They're pissing off everyone. They're making more enemies for Iran in trying to attack American bases, and that's always been the threat. So while we didn't think it would, of course, they would strike at some of our bases. Most people thought it would be in Iraq, where there would be the least blowback against Iran. And our military bases, the American bases in Iraq, are more isolated, so it would have less potential of having collateral damage to the Iraqi people, to other Muslims in the region. And Iran also has a better relationship and more control, especially with many of the rebel forces there. So you would think they would go after Iraq, which is what most people had expected. Instead, they went after Qatar. We'll talk about that more in a second. But so that's what they were threatening. And as we see in the full discussion here, this isn't the first time. They said they were going to attack American bases within 48 hours. This is completely consistent with what Iran always says in these kind of scenarios. The thing that's a little different is that they said that they would attack France. They would attack the United Kingdom. They would attack the allies of the United States. Now, that's unusual because they normally don't. Iran doesn't normally say, oh, well, we're going to attack Europe as well. They say they attack America, of course. And they say they're going to attack Israel, of course. And they always do. And we've seen many times that the resulting response by Iran, usually, like if we kill Soleimani, one of their generals, a couple of low to mid-level individuals, they'll fire a bunch of rockets or mortars at a base, usually in Iraq, and then it's over. They fire off a couple of mortars, they fire a couple of rockets, they miss the American base, they do not hit American citizens, they miss by sometimes hundreds of yards, if not thousands of yards, but it's good enough for Iran to say, see, we struck back. And then the United States will then respond back to them and say, well, if you attack us, we're going to attack you. Please stop, blah, blah. And it ends. That's usually the interplay. In this case, they're saying France and the United Kingdom are going to be targets. That's different. And I don't think that's smart of Iran. I believe what they're trying to do in Iran is to increase the amount of fear and the amount of pressure on the United States. By going to our allies, by going to Europe, they're trying to get the people to be terrified for their own lives, and therefore to add pressure on President Trump to back down and to back away, to stop anything from going any further. I truly do not believe that Iran is dumb enough to attack the United Kingdom, to attack France, as they have threatened to do. Because if they do, they're only adding to the list of enemies and individuals who are willing to attack them. That's not in their best interest in Iran. So I find this to be bluster. Unique bluster that's a little different than what we've normally heard, but bluster all the same. Hang on one second. I just need to turn on one of my fans because my computer is burning up right now. Hold on one second, folks. Sorry for that. Yeah, like I said, one of my computers was starting to overheat. And I don't want that to interrupt or stop the conversation that we're having right now. So I think that was important to identify. So I don't think that we're seeing escalation. A lot of people have been terrified of that. It's not happening. That's not a realistic outcome at this point. It is bluster. Now, it is true that after making this threat, and this threat being confirmed around the world, the mainstream media staying away from it for whatever reason, probably because they don't want to in the United States, they don't want the public to acknowledge or recognize that Iran is making threats it cannot accomplish. They can't kill 50,000 Americans, even if they wanted to. They don't have enough weapons. And we have to remember that the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas have been defeated. All of the proxy terrorist groups that Iran normally uses to attack America and Iran and Europe and England, they don't have them. They've all been beaten, and they're pretty much in submission or completely disorganized for the last 2 years. Those groups are no longer capable. So this is all on Iran by itself. And Iran has no friends. Yes, the prime minister, one of the ambassadors of Iran, went to Russia today. That was a regularly scheduled meeting. They were going there anyway. It had nothing to do, well, the fact that they were going to Russia had nothing to do with what President Trump did. It just changed what the nature of the conversation was about. And Russia has come out and said, yes, they do support Iran as we expected, just like China has come out and said they support Iran as we expected, which is part of the triumvirate created by the Biden-Harris administration after the start of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. The sanctions, which drove Russia to the only people who would actually work with them to circumvent those sanctions. That would be Iran, that would be China. So there is no surprise there. But Russia, as we mentioned yesterday in our Sunday live stream, Russia has no ability militarily to support Iran. They came out and said they would be more than happy to support Iran conditionally. That they would be able to help them. They'll try and help them financially. They'll help them with supplies if they can. They're not going to help them militarily. They're not going to give them rockets and drones and the rest. And that's what Iran needs. So to say that politically Russia is going to try and help influence the United States means nothing. For Russia to say that they're going to have conversations with Donald Trump and they're going to try and be the negotiators of any peace deal going forward in this current conflict is really meaningless. It's political fluff that looks and sounds strong, means nothing. Same thing with China. China has done the same thing. They've said political fluff. They support Iran. They'll give them food. They'll give them money. They'll politically support them in the UN. They're not going to put troops. They're not going to give them military aid. Not directly, anyway. China is probably more likely to do it than Russia because China isn't in a war right now and Russia is. But still, it equates to not really anything of substance. That being said, that brings us to the question, well, what about what happened today? Iran did, in fact, respond. They attacked Qatar. This was stupid of Iran. And again, mainstream media isn't giving the analysis of this. They're not even giving really the news on this. They're giving the fear on this. Oh my God, Iran struck Qatar. They were trying to attack the Americans. By the way, they didn't hit any Americans. No Americans were injured. No Americans were struck. No one got killed. As far as we know, the base was completely intact. It seems that Iran missed. All their missiles missed or were shot down. So no damage to the United States. Pretty meaningless, which is normal. This is what we consistently tend to see when Iran reacts to us destroying their military and their military leadership, their infrastructure, or their nuclear program. This is what has happened for 30 years. So again, not a surprise. What is the surprise and what should be emphasized, and you're not really hearing that, is that Iran struck Qatar. Now, Qatar, most people don't realize, has evolved into pretty much the Geneva, the Switzerland of the Middle East. Many of and most of the various terrorist organizations, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Iran, go to Qatar and they use Qatar for their banking, and they use it for their negotiations. And so in that sense, it's very much like Switzerland. It's the one nation they all go to. They all have bases and headquarters inside Qatar so that they can do the various back channel conversations that they tend to have in their many, many, many conflicts they have around the world. So for Iran to attack Qatar, that doesn't make any sense. That's stupid. You're attacking Switzerland. You're attacking Geneva. You're attacking the very nation that helps to negotiate peace deals on the various behalf of the terrorist organizations around the world. And there is no terrorist organization in the world bigger than Iran itself. Why would they attack Qatar? And I think there's a very significant reason for that. Because Qatar just gave the United States a jet. Qatar came out and said that they were on the same side as Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates in supporting the United States, in supporting Donald Trump. Saudi Arabia is not a friend to Iran. In fact, they're enemies. The United Arab Emirates are not friends. In fact, they're enemies with Iran. So in Qatar taking the same side as Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, well, that means they're against Iran. And so Iran is retaliating against that statement, that show of camaraderie and willingness to work with the United States. They're mad at them. They didn't like that Qatar didn't take Iran's side. And because they didn't take Iran's side, they're willing to bomb Doha, which is where many of these negotiations take place, as well as the U.S. base. It's that simple. And we talked about this for weeks now. In many of our Sunday live streams, we've been talking, because we cover for those who don't know, on our Sunday live stream, we spend hours, the first 2-3 hours of the show, each year, each week, and now for 8 years, we talk about international politics. We talk about how the world is interacting with the United States. So we've covered this in the last couple of months. We've been talking about Qatar, the jet. We've talked about Saudi Arabia and its interactions with Donald Trump, how that was pivotal in getting the India-Pakistan conflict settled. So Iran knows the more that the Middle East is working with Donald Trump, with the United States, the less aligned they are with Iran and Iran's terrorist motivations and their form of Shia Islam, the Ayatollah. So that's why I found this to be very interesting. And again, most of the news media weren't emphasizing why it's important that they attacked in Qatar instead of Iraq, which is what everyone expected. In fact, it was so expected, I believe it was NPR. Where is it? Do I have it? I had an article. I have the article, but NPR was initially reporting that that Iran had also sent missiles not only into Qatar, but into Iraq as well, and that U.S. bases in Iraq were being targeted. That wasn't true. Again, there's a lot of, well, I don't want to call it misinformation, but jumping the gun. NPR and many news media, larger news media stations, had expected the normal process, which be that Iran is attacking the U.S. in one of the most vulnerable nation states out of the Middle East, which would be Iraq, where there's more isolation, less potential for collateral damage, and there's better relations with Iran. That didn't happen. So NPR got the story wrong, as well as several other news stations as well, many of them very left-leaning. They completely screwed the article. They misinformed the public. There was no attack on Iraq. There was the fear and there was the expectation by the U.S. military that Iraq would be targeted. And in the next 48 hours, it is highly likely that by Wednesday, Thursday, we will see that Iran will attack in Qatar, in Iraq, besides their attack in Qatar. That's probable, highly probable that we're going to see that happen. I'd be shocked if it didn't. But again, I expect it to be just like what we saw with Qatar. Rockets are going to be used. These are going to be mid-range rockets. They're not going to be very accurate. Most of them will be shot down by U.S. defenses. We will be prepared for this, and there'll be no loss of life or minimal injuries to American citizens or pretty much anyone. That's what you can expect. Again, once we start thinking this through, the fear level drops and drops and drops. This is not World War III. This is a regional war, and it could be a significant regional war, especially if we see China start taking actions against Taiwan, thinking that this is their opportunity, while the United States is distracted on two fronts, that would be in the Middle East and and through our proxy of the Ukraine in Europe, that we would be distracted and therefore they would be free and clear to go into Taiwan. I don't think that's the case, and I think that while China might like that idea, they are confident that now is not the time. Japan is mostly done with building their military. South Korea has been building up its small arms and its military. Philippines is already pissed off at China, and that happened in 2023. So they're on higher alert as well. Even though much of the world is looking at what the United States is doing in the Middle East and in Europe, Southeast Asia is looking directly at China with no distraction. They don't care about everything else. They're only paying attention to China. So I think we will not see that happen. I think that's important to bring about. By the way, folks, if you're finding this somewhat informative, if you're finding it interesting, a unique take on these events, if it is lowering your stress level, reducing the fear that you have that the mainstream media is thriving on right now, that they are more than happy to promote, then please give us a like, a share, and subscribe. For those who are not able to see this live, like on YouTube, like on Twitter, I apologize. I was using a new format. It did not take over, it seems. So I apologize for that. You're seeing this, the recorded version. Please do me a favor, like, share, and subscribe anyway, and I look forward to your comments. However you are watching this, please do make a comment. Whether you agree or disagree, you can leave comments in the chat. I'm happy to see all of them. Whether you agree or not on what you think is happening at this time. And if you want, you can also rumble rant and get your question up to the top of any list of questions that may be out there. So that being said, let me get back on focus here. So I think that what we are seeing here is a normal pattern. This is not escalation, not from the Iranians, not at this point. They are doing what we would normally expect and what has been consistent for 30 years. A lot of saber rattling, a couple of feeble attempts to attack America, and then that blows over. The real question is, how do they react to Israel? Israel is not the United States. They are actively dropping bombs. But even though Iran has said that they could continue this fight against Israel for the next 2 years, as they have reportedly stated and confirmed by international news media, that isn't realistic. They don't have, as much as they have been building up ballistic missiles since the Obama administration, since 2016, when the Iran nuclear deal gave them roughly $2 billion to build up their weapons arsenal, that has been depleted, both because they have been sending out a lot of those missiles and drones, the missiles to the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas, who have used them up over the years. The drones, many of them have gone to Russia, who have been using them in the Ukraine. So that left less for Iran itself because they didn't expect to be the frontline fighter in any of their activities. They expected the other terrorist organizations they puppet to be handling this for them. So they don't have the biggest backlog of weapons. They've been shipping them out. We believe, and estimates are out there right now, that they have only between 4,000 and 8,000 offensive missiles and far, far less in the hundreds, if not maybe 1,000, of defensive missiles, which means they cannot continue to fight for 2 years, even though they say that. Why? Because the left-leaning news media, who think Orange Man bad, who are looking for anything that makes Donald Trump look bad, anything that can break MAGA, that can break Republicans, that can give them an opportunity to win in the 2026 midterm elections, they're going to focus on the fact that Iran said they can fight this war for 2 years with missiles alone. That's not realistic. It's just not. Militarily, they don't have the supplies. They don't have the resources, the ability to build those missiles fast enough to continue this operation at the levels that they have been going. It's just not consistently possible. So they know the left-leaning news media is going to focus on the 2-year comment rather than the reality that they can't do that. And so they're using that fear to try and help keep the United States out of this conflict so they can focus on Israel alone and try to force the world to demonize Israel and join their side. It's not working because no one likes Iran. No one likes the Ayatollah. No one wants to be forced to believe whatever it is the Ayatollah believes. And no one trusts Iran. Therefore, they're all abandoning them. And now with their attacks on other Middle Eastern nations, well, Iran has driven itself further into isolation, and they're going to be all by themselves. I think this is important to understand because it takes away a lot of the fear. This is not, I keep saying it, it's not World War III. Now, according to the BBC, who did, they asked, what do we know about the Iranian attack about the U.S. On the U.S. base in Qatar? Why did they target that? Well, the simple answer is, now you're going to hear from the BBC and much of the news media, they'll say, well, it's because there's so many Americans there. That's where CENTCOM is. That's where there's several thousand, about 8,000 U.S. citizens, members of the State Department, members of the U.S. military are in Qatar, especially at the base, Al Uwaid Air Base in Qatar. But I think they're leaving out the fact that it's because Qatar is on the side of America. That's what the jet was meant to symbolize. That's why they're attacking them. There were other bases. They could have attacked our air bases in Saudi Arabia. They could have attacked our air bases in Bahrain. They didn't. They attacked Qatar instead. And I think that's critical. But it also seems that, again, Iran doesn't want this to escalate. We knew the attack was coming. Before the attack happened, as reported by the BBC and other international news media, we saw that Qatar had already closed down its airspace, that airplanes were already being rerouted away from Doha, away from the Air Force base, the American U.S. base, that they were clearing out a lane so that there would be no collateral damage. And the U.S. had already warned its citizens, as did the United Kingdom, had already warned their citizens and their military to be prepared that something might be happening, that we had expectation that they could come under attack, which they did a couple of hours after that. I believe it was about 1 hour after the warnings had come out, after the airspace had been closed off, then came the missile attack. We knew it was going to happen. We were prepared, which tends to tell me this is something that we've seen before. where Iran saber rattles, says they're going to destroy America, says that they are the biggest, baddest fighter in the Middle East, and they telegraph everything they are doing against America. They do the least possible damage, and they telegraph everything they are doing. So America is very clearly aware of every step they are taking to look like they've reacted without actually doing anything to react. And I think that's confirmed when we look at this, that we know that 100 flights that were going to Doha were redirected, that the airspace was closed, that our bases were made aware that an attack was possible. We knew this. We knew this was coming. The back channels, I would not be surprised that back channels told America exactly what was going to happen. Does that sound like World War III to you? I know there's a lot of people who are very fearful. Most of them are people who believe in isolationism and believe in non-intervention. And I understand why they believe those things, and I understand they have the best interest of America at heart. But America first doesn't mean America only. MAGA doesn't mean that America doesn't have interactions with the rest of the world. We are still the biggest, the biggest superpower. We're the biggest economy. We are the most free. We are on the front line with every nation in the world. That doesn't change. So I think that is important to look at. And many people are afraid, and I understand why. If you're looking at only the messaging coming from the left-leaning news media of the United States, you've been convinced this is going to be World War III. We have been told for 10 years that World War III is on the edge. We're on a knife edge before we go into World War III. Many people are saying it's like World War I. This is just like Archduke Ferdinand, and that we could just slip into a global war. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Qatar is not on the side of Iran. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, the biggest powers in the Middle East are not on the side of Iran. Turkey isn't coming to rescue Iran. Pakistan is not coming to rescue Iran. In fact, it is rumored that Pakistan, some of their generals, helped the United States and or Israel in doing some of the attacks that have been going on for the last week. So Pakistan's out. China's not coming to rescue them. Russia's not coming to rescue them. This is not going to World War III. No one's taking the side of Iran. This is not escalating beyond the region. But it is a regional war. And it does have impact. So that being said, and I think that's important. I think that's very important. So you shouldn't be afraid. It's not World War III. It's a regional war. And the problem could be that there are multiple simultaneous regional wars, but that's not World War III. Not the same thing. So now that we know that that's the case, does the United States have a reason to put boots on the ground in Iran? Should we regime change? And that's the other big news that a lot of people were talking about today. Oh my God, we need to have regime change. There's going to be regime change. I believe, by the way, I found it. This is the NPR article. And in this article, they incorrectly initially, and they've since changed the title, because they initially had it as Iran attacks U.S. base in Qatar and Iraq. They have since corrected the title. They have corrected the story. But that was the article that they had initially said. But right now, a lot of people, here we go, are concerned because Donald Trump has now said regime change in Iran is not a bad thing. Regime change isn't terrible. And by the way, it's not. But there's a difference between organic change that comes from within the nation, which usually involves a civil war, kind of like what we saw in Syria. And very much you see that internal change, very often with civil wars. Myanmar's had that happen, Mozambique, we've seen this throughout Africa, we've seen this in many nations. And then there's the external change. which is what Donald Trump is talking about, which is a coup of the government, a external force coming in and removing that government that exists because our government says so, because a bigger first world nation says, nope, we're changing the government in there. That is very interesting. Regime change, forced regime change, only comes about, is only successful when we occupy the land. The biggest problem that the United States had in the Middle East in terms of Iraq and in terms of Afghanistan isn't that we were fighting in Iraq or in Afghanistan. It was that we didn't take the land. The number one thing that if you are in a war, you are fighting for something, not an idea, but something concrete, something tangible. You're taking the resources, you're taking the people, you're taking the land. And if you're not doing those things, you shouldn't be fighting the war. This is a position we have long held in this on this channel, and I've said this ever since Iraq, actually even before then. If we are not willing to own every inch of land that American soldiers fight and bleed and die over, then we shouldn't be in that conflict. We shouldn't be in that war. Doesn't matter who we're fighting, doesn't matter why we're fighting. If we don't get to own the land, it's not worth doing. It's not important. And that was the problem with Iraq and Afghanistan. I said this very much about President Bush. He had no policy, no plan to take over. He had no idea what to do to win the war. He knew that America could overpower Iraq and Afghanistan. We knew that we had the military might to win the fight, and we did. That wasn't the problem. What do you do next? What do you do with the government? If we're not owning that place, then we let puppets run it. Those puppets invariably always fail. And the moment that we take our support away from those puppet governments, the moment we retreat from those areas for whatever reason, either to readjust or to run away like Joe Biden did in Afghanistan, well then other groups will come in and overturn the government that we overturned. So the puppets we put in place will no longer be in power, and someone else will be. And so the dynamics have completely changed, and usually it's very unstable. The government in Afghanistan right now is highly unstable. The government in Iraq is highly unstable because we didn't do the foundational thing. What we should have done with Iraq and in Afghanistan is we should have made them commonwealths. We should take them over. When the United States went in and we decided to fight and our soldiers bled and died, that meant we owned those countries. When we won the fight, we should have owned those countries, turned them into commonwealths. That means we would have rebuilt the infrastructure. They would actually have functioning water and electricity, roads, hospitals, schools. Women would be educated. They would be able to get jobs. People would have freedom to be able to speak, to be involved in their government, that they would have a stable economy under the US dollar. There would be investments in technology and upgrading their nations so that people would be able to better live, help them with their farming. And this would have improved those lands as they are a commonwealth, allowing the next generation or two of the youth to understand what happened, why it happened, and to make better decisions, not just to run to fanatical, radical terrorists because they're angry, because the government sucks, and their family died, and America is just the big bad in the world. That's the problem. We didn't make them commonwealths. We didn't rebuild the infrastructure. We didn't bring freedom and education to women and men and the youth. We let them languish, and that led them towards terrorism, which means terrorism continues to expand. That's just the reality of it. So what Donald Trump is saying is, oh, well, we want regime change. Are we willing, as the American people, to take over Iran? If we are not willing to take over every inch of land that an American soldier will bleed over, will die over, will be fighting for, if we do not take every inch of land and turn it into a commonwealth of the United States, it is not worth the effort. Any regime, yes, will get rid of the Ayatollah, put in puppets, because we will beat Iran militarily. That's not a question. They may be strong for the Middle East. They're not strong enough to take on the United States. They are not. We will beat them. We will destroy them. And that will take some time, but it will be obvious quickly that we, the United States, will be able to beat them militarily. No one questions that. And then what? The Ayatollah will be removed. Who will be put in his place? Puppets for the United States? Puppets for Saudi Arabia? Puppets for Britain? Doesn't matter. Because whomever we put in, the moment the U.S. retreats, they're going to be toppled. There will be civil war. There will be fanatical terrorists trying to continue the efforts of the Ayatollah because that's all they know. That's all they were taught to do. You'd have to kill every single member of the the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and all of its believers in Iran and kill them all so that it would not fester if the United States was not in complete and 100% control. And that's not what we're looking to do. So I think Donald Trump is wrong. He's wrong. He's right. Regime change is needed. And I do believe that the Iranian people want it. They said that in 2012 during the Arab Spring. They were screaming, the Green Movement in Iran, which was hoping to overthrow the Ayatollah. They were screaming to Obama, President Obama at the time, and saying, please give us support. Help us to overthrow the Ayatollah. And Barack Obama ignored them. He just ignored the entire Green Movement. You don't have to believe me. Look it up. I think it was 2011 or 2012, the Green Movement during the Arab Spring. Barack Obama completely ignored the Iranians who wanted to overthrow their government, threw them under a bus, didn't care. So we've screwed this up in the past with Democrats and with Republicans. The answer is we either take it as a commonwealth or we don't bother with the regime change and let that happen organically within Iran on its own. And I believe eventually, once this Ayatollah dies of natural causes, yeah, I think it will eventually break down. There will be a civil war within Iran, and at that point, there will be a regime change. To what, I don't know exactly, but it won't be the terrorist stronghold that it is today. It will be completely transformed. And Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, the other nations in the Middle East will be very influential in shaping what Iran will become in the future as opposed to what it is now. They don't need the United States to make that happen. That's the organic path. So the problem is, but is there support for Donald Trump and his plan? Well, according to Snap polls, and these are not highly credible. Let me be very clear. There's a poll that came out from YouGov that a lot of people are starting to point to. Within the last 24 hours, they've come out with polling. But I want you to be clear, because this is one of their daily polls, which I took today. And this is from today. I think this was about 3 o'clock, about an hour before I went live. I took this poll, which is dealing with the Middle East and how Americans feel about this. It may be the very same poll that they're quoting right now. And in that poll, I want you to understand, there are certain things like, here it is. There's a question here. Do you think countries like the U.S. and Israel have a right to strike inside another country to prevent, it was 3:30, to prevent nuclear development. I answered the question, yes, if it prevents a future war. It is possible, depends on the circumstances. There's a lot not asked or not being, the details aren't clear in that question. So if it's preventing a war, yes, it can be a reason why we've done it. And this is something that has happened around the world. The response, not the live results as of 3:30 Eastern Standard Time today, half an hour before I went live, was about 35% agreed with me. Yes, there are reasons why you would do this. And about 44% said no. 19% said with the UN approval, which is a yes. The 19% saying, what with UN approval, will you agree? It is something that we would do to prevent a war. So that 35% is actually more like, or it says, it would be more like 53%. 53% say yes. But they're trying to split up the answer. They're trying to not make a majority. They are purposefully changing the way people are responding so that when they say, oh no, 35% said that we should go into Iran, as an example, and stop them from having a nuclear weapon as a preventative measure, and 44% no, that's not the question you asked. That's not the answers that you provided. The answer is 53% said yes, depending on the conditions. Depending on the circumstances, yes, 53% said yes, but they don't want you to see that. And more importantly, I want you to understand the bias that is built into the YouGov poll. Their response to me saying, yes, if it prevents a war, which 53% of people agree with, their answer was, I see. This kind of conflict doesn't stay contained. People are already dying on both sides, as if I didn't know that. And humanitarian impact is fast growing, as if I don't know that. As if I didn't understand the consequences of war. They're assuming you're an idiot. More importantly, they are influencing the way you answer questions. This is the left scolding you for holding a position, an opinion on a badly worded question with even worsely worded answers. You didn't answer the way they wanted you to answer this poll. So they are subliminally and directly influencing the answers that they are going to get in the questions. A lot of the news media isn't pointing to that. So when they say, oh, here's a snap poll, and 35% of U.S. adults strongly or somewhat approve of the U.S. bombing Iran, while 46% strongly or somewhat disapproves, and 19% aren't sure. How did you ask the question? Is it like this question, where you're asking, oh, do you think the U.S. or Israel have the right to stop a nation from having nuclear weapons and creating war? Is that something we have a right to do? 53% say yes, depending on the conditions. They didn't answer. They won't report that. And that's important, I think. I think that's very important. Okay, let me go on a little bit. Now, a lot of others are pointing out that Donald Trump's approval rating is down. And they're like, oh my God, Donald Trump has been losing his approval. He's falling apart. The American people don't trust him. Look back to when Donald Trump was the 45th president. His approval rating was in the 40 percentile consistently. 39, 41, 43, 38. This is exactly where he's always been. His average approval rating is exactly what it was in the first term of the Trump administration. Unlike, as we can clearly see under the Biden administration, it was dropping off of a cliff. People from the very beginning of the Biden administration, no one believed he had control of our government, had the best interest of America at heart, that he was purely partisan and just looking to win the next election. And everything he did, every policy that came out of the Biden-Harris administration was a failure. And the public agreed. And that's why we saw that the Biden approval rating dropped down below what we saw for the Trump administration in his first term, and then drop even lower than that because Biden was a failure. And Trump is consistent with the American people. Roughly the same number of people trusted Donald Trump in 2017 as trust Trump in 2025. It is consistent. He isn't below. He hasn't completely failed. He hasn't been abandoned by all the Republicans or all the MAGA or the America First or even independents. That's not happening. But the media is trying to let you know that, oh, no, this was bad. This was World War III. This is Donald Trump being a warmonger. That isn't what we see. Let me step back a moment. And I'm happy to hear any comments of people who disagree with what I'm saying. I'm always happy to hear that. But we will hear that people are going to say, well, Donald Trump lied. No, he didn't. And we hear this in the media all over the place. Even though the Democrats, the Democratic leadership are happy that Iran doesn't have nukes. They were encouraging this. While the world was encouraging this, of course they're now going to say after the fact, oh, Donald Trump's such a mean guy, he's so bad, Orange Man bad, but thank you for doing what they wanted. And they're trying to say now that Donald Trump is some kind of warmonger. No, he's not. That he lied to the American people. That's not what he clearly, in his first 140 days in office, he has spent the time trying to create more peace deals than most presidents get to even consider in their first 4 years. He's done that in the first 120 days. He has been very committed to trying to get peace. And he always said, in every campaign from 2016 to 2025, he has always said Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, that he would not allow them to have a nuclear weapon, that he would take action to prevent Iran from having nuclear weapons. He has never taken that off the table. Yes, he didn't want to start new wars, but he always said that he would take nuclear weapons out of the hands of the Iranian government. That's not inconsistent for him, which is why his approval rating, as much as the news media wants to make it sound like it's falling apart, isn't falling apart. There is division at this moment. There's a lot of people say, I do not believe that America should take over Iran. And I agree. If we're not willing to take it over, don't fight. I agree. But that's a very far difference between Iran should have a nuclear weapon. I don't agree. There's a wide chasm between the two, and it's not fear-mongering. It's not terrifying. It's not World War III by removing the threat that the entire world was afraid of and has been afraid of for decades, but no one had the balls to do anything about. I think it's important to understand it in the context that it should be under, that is in front of us. They're telling you Donald Trump lied because they want to win the midterm elections, because they have told you Orange Man bad for over a decade, because some want power and they don't care what they have to say. They have been trying to make scandals of everything and anything that Donald Trump has done for the last decade. And now the latest thing is he's a warmonger. He's just like Barack Obama. He's just like Joe Biden. He's nothing like Barack Obama. He's nothing like Joe Biden. They were creating wars, and they got nothing out of them. You can say the same thing about Bush. Created a war. We got nothing out of that. We already have gotten what we wanted out of Iran. We took away their nuclear weapons. We took away their capabilities. Now, some people will say, but Mike, Some of the Iranian nuclear material, some of the uranium, there were like 16 trucks. They were moving a bunch of uranium and or other materials, we believe, out of some of these nuclear facilities before Donald Trump struck. Probably at least some of it, but not all of it. We don't believe, and the world doesn't believe, because we'd be able to see the radiation on those trucks. We'd be able to track that. That's something that the world looks for on a regular basis. We have satellites around the world that are looking for nuclear material being transported by vehicles, by planes, by boats, by submarines. We're constantly trying to track for that. Because nuclear weapons exist in the world, and you can buy them right now. I mean, quite literally, if Iran really wanted to have a nuclear weapon tomorrow, they could buy it. They were a couple of years ago, you could buy them, back in the 90s, you could buy nuclear weapons from Kazakhstan. They cost $12 million each, which is nothing. For governments, that's nothing. $12 million you could own your very own nuclear missile. Now, how would you transport it? That's your problem. Because the moment you try and transport it, everyone will be able to see it. Everyone will see that missile. Its signature will show up. The transport would be identified. It would be on every satellite. So the fact that 16 trucks went from some of the nuclear facilities in Iran to other locations, one, we know where they went, and two, they didn't register in terms of their radioactivity. Now, it could be that they put it in lead cases and they made sure that it wouldn't show up. There would still be trace radiation. I'm not disputing that at least some of the nuclear material was moved away. But if they don't have a facility, if they don't have the centrifuges, if they don't have the scientists, if they don't have the electricity, if they don't have the laboratories, if they don't have everything it takes, all the other things besides just having some uranium, if they don't have everything else, then it doesn't matter. They can't make a nuclear weapon. We succeeded. If nothing else, we have driven back the Iranian attempt to make nuclear weapons by at least 5 years, if not a decade. And that's part of why we did it. That's why we have consistently done it since the 1990s. To constantly keep them, they are always getting closer, but they never can get an actual nuclear weapon. Everything else is fear-mongering. Everything else you're hearing about this is fear-mongering. It's not World War III. It's not. Now, will Iran, they don't have the military capability to fight toe-to-toe for 2 years. They don't. They'll tell you they do, they don't. And they know it. They can't fight the United States head-to-head, and they know it. That's why you can see what happened when they're attacking in Qatar. They're angry with Qatar. They're okay with killing Qatari civilians because they're a terrorist nation, and they don't mind killing civilians of anyone. If they don't believe what the Ayatollah believes, they're more than willing to kill civilians, regardless of whether they're American or British or French or Qatari. So they know they can't directly attack us. And they know the more that they attack these military bases in Saudi Arabia, in Brunei, in the United Arab Emirates, in Qatar, they're making enemies of the fellow Middle Eastern nations. They're losing their support actively. So they can't continue to have a head-to-head fight. In Iraq, maybe. Everywhere else, no. They can do it in Iraq. That's about it. And that isn't significant enough. So what we will probably see is what we've been hearing. The FBI has been speaking with governors across America, and they're saying Joe Biden allowed 8 million illegal aliens into America. Many of those 8 million individuals were refugees and or illegal aliens from the Middle East. Some of them are terrorists. Even if it's 1 in every 1,000, that is hundreds of terrorists were allowed into America. In fact, thousands of terrorists were allowed into America. If it's only 1 in every 100, if it's 1 in every 1,000, there are thousands of sleeper agents in the United States at this time because of the Biden-Harris Democratic progressive open border policy. That is the danger. That danger was created before Donald Trump. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. We've seen that illegal aliens and refugees coming into America has decreased by 95% since Donald Trump was in. It went down when he was the 45th president of the United States. It instantly went down when he became the 47th president of the United States. It was the Biden administration that increased the net risk to America. Those refugees we took in from the Middle East and everywhere else, we have no idea what their backstories are. We have no idea who these people are. We did not do our research. That's why we had 8 Kazakhstani ISIS members, ISIS terrorists, operating in the United States for a full year before we could identify them, track them down, and deport them. Because the Biden administration didn't care. They let them in. And now, Iran is very likely telling some of those sleeper agents to activate, to commit chaos, to attack American citizens domestically, because Iran can't reach them. Iran can't affect the American people directly. Cannot. So they're going to do it through terror. Because that's what Iran actually exports. That's their number one export, terrorism. That is their number one resource, terrorism. And so the danger does exist. And we likely will see more mass shooters in America. We will likely see more suicidal maniacs attacking American citizens. Very likely. And it's not racist, but just going by the concentrations of where people are, you're probably going to see more of these attacks in Michigan, kind of like what we saw at Cross Point Church yesterday in Michigan. We'll probably see events like that. We'll probably see them in some of the major cities like New York, Chicago, Boston, LA, Austin, Seattle, Brooklyn, New York. You're going to see those areas are going to have insane, fanatical psychopaths that are going to try and harm innocent civilians. And I call them insane psychopaths not because they're Muslim. I don't care about that. It's because they are fanatical, because they believe in suicide attacks. They believe in mass shootings. And that is horrific and terrible. So that is a real threat. And that real threat came about because of Democrats, came about because of progressives. It came about because of the open border policies that Democrats were more concerned about than the American people, because they wanted votes. They wanted the open door policy to get illegal aliens swamping America, to increase the number of people who are in California, who are in New York and Boston and Chicago, so they could have more power in Congress, and they could then pass a path to citizenship, which would make these illegal aliens second-class citizens, dependent on the Democratic Party forever, and Democrats would be able to have power. Because 8 million votes that are enslaved to you, and that's a minimum number. That doesn't count the illegal aliens already in America, which are somewhere around 40 to 50 million. So you're talking about 58 million votes, potentially. And that's enough that no Democrat would ever lose for the next 20 years. And they knew that. And they were more concerned about that than the potential danger of having sleeper agents and known terrorists in America. Under the Biden administration, the number of terrorists in America increased by well over 3,000%. 3,000%. And that's the ones we knew of. Do you have any doubt there are sleeper agents in America after 4 years of Joe Biden and having an open door policy? Of places like New York State, New York City, California, LA, Seattle, Austin, Boston, Chicago, after them having open door policy saying, come on in, we're going to put you in a 3-star hotel. Do you have any doubt that we have sleeper agents in America? And some of those sleeper agents are aligned with ISIS and Al Qaeda. They're aligned with Hezbollah and Hamas. They're aligned with, they're not even, and that's not even the worst of it, because there are people in Georgetown, in our colleges, that are just as bad. As an example, we know, and this is being reported, it really hasn't been reported by the mainstream news media yet. It is being reported by Fox News. It is being reported by the Jewish Institute. But if you look through, you're not going to see NBC. NBC News isn't covering this. ABC, CBS, the BBC, Time Magazine, Newsweek. They're not covering this. The Jerusalem Post is covering this. But you actually have to go and check out Congressman Randy Fine. Congressman Randy Fine was the first one to identify yesterday that a professor at Georgetown University is hoping that Iran will make a bomb and attack American citizens. This is in Georgetown. This is what's being taught to our students. This is insurrectionist. And now, the individual, the professor who actually did this, who's a Jonathan, I believe, and I'm going by, now this part is slightly speculative. I believe it is Jonathan Brown is the professor. Jonathan A.C. Brown, who is a professor of Islamic civilization at Georgetown University. This individual deleted their comment, hoping that no one would find out, that it would escape attention, that just like the professor at Cornell University, just like the professors at Harvard and Columbia and UCLA and across this entire nation, this entire movement of the pro-Hamas, pro-terrorism, anti-American sentiment, he thought it would blow over, that no one would notice, that the progressives would laud him and everyone else would not notice. And the mainstream news media would not tell you about it. And the mainstream news media hasn't. This is a congressman who is saying that there is an American who is actively trying to encourage a foreign nation to kill American citizens. This should be denounced. This Georgetown professor should be denounced. And the fact that he just, I'll delete the tweet as if it never happened. That's not good enough. This guy is teaching God knows what. It's like being a Confucius Institute spy. He is there, and what is he teaching these students in his Islamic civilization class? That it's okay for Iran to attack civilians, to have a bomb, a nuclear bomb, and to blow it up against American citizens? This is what the education our kids are getting? Look, this is very upsetting to me, obviously. It may or may not be upsetting to others. But I think this needs to be called out. Georgetown University, I don't know what's going on with you guys. Anyone who's giving an endowment to Georgetown University, you should really reconsider what you're doing. Look at what you are supporting. You are supporting.
There's a dragon on the wire, breathing digital flames. No sound bites allowed is the name of his game. With a coffee in one hand and his puppy on his lap, cigarettes curling, smoking his political trap. Michael Vass roars through the screen. flags, painting red and blue skies with his fiery cry. He's the world's watchdog, calling out the bluff. Right-wing swagger, but his heart's pretty tough.
Hello, everybody. That's right. I am back. That's right. Me, live with everyone. I'm actually here live with everyone. Give me 1 second. I'll pop back up the chat. Yes, I'm live with you here. You were watching. I initially had done the show on Rumble live at about 4 o'clock. And because Rumble hates YouTube, YouTube hates Rumble, it didn't go live at that time on YouTube. So then I decided to rebroadcast that, which you were just watching, for the last hour and 15 minutes. That was the end of the program there. But I wanted to jump in now at the end to add in the breaking news. Because as I have been saying for the last 12 days, as I've been saying for quite some time, it's not World War III. World War III is fear-mongering. It is people who are afraid, those who are isolationist, those who are non-interventionist, and most importantly, it is the messaging, the approved messaging of the mainstream news media telling you to be afraid, to shut up, and to obey. That's what I have said consistently. I said it at the beginning of this show, this video. I started off telling you it's not World War III. Anyone who's telling you that is lying to you. And so I want to make sure you understand, and give me a second. There I am. That while this program was going on, while I was rebroadcasting what I had put on Rumble, so the people on Rumble right now have no idea this is going on, but so this is YouTube and Twitter exclusive at the moment. We know now, about a little over half an hour ago, that President Donald Trump has announced to the world that there is a ceasefire. That there's a ceasefire between Israel and Iran, that within 6 hours, roughly from now, both parties will go into a ceasefire that will last for 12 hours, and then the war is over. And that's it. And so everyone who's been telling you that this is World War III, they're wrong. Everyone who told you that this is going to absolutely mandate, we're going to be dropping American troops on Iranian soil, they're wrong. They were absolutely wrong. And I was against that idea. I told you yesterday. I told you today. I didn't think that was realistic. And more importantly, that we wouldn't do that unless we intended to take over Iran. We had to have that commitment. Regime change is nice. Let it happen organically. That's what I said today. That's what I've said for quite some time. And I did not think that Donald Trump was going to do that. He wasn't looking to start a war. And he very specifically did exactly what he promised. No nuclear weapons for Iran. No nuclear program for Iran. And instead of playing games like we have seen under Bush, under Obama, under Biden, rather than playing these games that we've been doing for 30 years with Iran, and whether or not they're getting closer to having a nuclear weapon, rather than just wipe the table clean. It's a full reset. Now, does that reset Iran back 5 years? Does it reset them back 10 years? I don't know. But it's in that range. And that gives us breathing room. That gives lots of time for change in the leadership. It gives time for change of the regime. It gives us time to have negotiations, to make even better deals. A lot can happen. And as I said in the video earlier, and I started off, this is exactly what we always have seen in this scenario. None of this was new. Everyone was freaking out because they always freak out when this happens. This has happened multiple times now. Either the U.S. or Israel for the U.S. will go in. They take out a nuclear scientist in Iran. They take out a couple of generals. They take out they bomb some of the facilities, either that are assisting or directly related to the nuclear weapons. Iran freaks out. Usually In the past, they have used their proxies, Hamas in particular, but Hezbollah and the Houthis, to fire off rockets and to attack Israel on behalf of Iran. And then the event's pretty much over. Sometimes they'll throw a couple of rockets and missiles at the United States at one of our bases, usually our base in Iraq, which is isolated and separate from most of the Arabic populations in the Middle East. So it's a safe bet there. But usually that's what has happened, and then it's all over. In this case, as we saw, and as I was discussing, Iran made the mistake of going after Qatar, which made them the enemy of everyone in the Middle East, because that's basically the Middle East Switzerland. They had no friends. They went and they were speaking to Russia like they were expecting to anyway, and Russia said, "We'll help you with all kinds of stuff except military. We're not going to give you military help. You're on your own." China said, "We'd love to help you. We'll help you with all kinds of stuff except military. We're not going to step in with military. You're on your own with that." And as much as Iran wanted to say that they could fight for 2 years, they'll fight for 2 years. They don't have the resources. They don't have the capability. They cannot fight for 2 years. And they knew it. They couldn't probably keep fighting for the next 2 months. They knew that. Especially if the United States was going to be actively involved, and unlike prior presidents, again, Biden, Obama, Bush, many presidents, unlike prior presidents, Donald Trump will take action. He proved that. He will be decisive. He will follow up his words with action. And that's too much for Iran. They knew they were going to lose. And so the deal, which they were asking for the first day, 12 days ago, when Israel started bombing the scientists and the generals and the infrastructure in Iran, they were all automatically going to the back channels trying to reach, which would include Qatar, trying to reach out to the United States saying they want a peace deal. Donald Trump told you, oh yeah, they're trying to have peace. They want a peace deal. He changed the terms. Now, I didn't agree with Donald Trump when he said it would require unconditional surrender in reference to the nuclear capabilities of Iran. I didn't agree with that. I was very curious and cautious when he dropped the bombs. I was worried about any follow-up violence. I knew that there would be the usual mundane thing, which was a little different because they targeted Doha and Qatar instead of Iraq. So it was slightly different than what we normally had seen. But overall, I wasn't overly concerned. I did not think that Donald Trump would put boots on the ground in Iran because there was no reason to. Not unless Iran did something extremely different, stupid, something like a 9/11 event. Now, I still think that that we are still in danger of sleeper agents. As I discussed in the video, as I discussed on Sunday, I've talked about this for a long time. The 8 million illegal aliens that open door came into America under Biden-Harris that have no background checks, that we don't know who these people are. Again, if even 1 in 1,000 is a potential threat, that's like 10,000 terrorists in America. Even 1,000 terrorists in America. It's too many. And we all agree on that. And we know that there were hundreds of terrorists, that known and suspected terrorists that entered into America under the Biden administration per year. Hundreds. We know this. By the way, for reference, under the entire 4 years of the Trump administration, the 45th Trump administration, we knew that we had all of 13 known or suspected terrorists entered the United States under Donald Trump as the 45th president. Under Joe Biden, that number is about 300. That's a fact. That's a fact. Hundreds were allowed into America. So to say that we possibly have sleeper cells in America right now is Iranian sleeper cells that are willing to commit acts of terror because that's what Iran exports. Yes, that is still possible. and Americans are still potentially in danger of that, and there's not much we can do about it. There's nothing we can do. But it is a fact and it is a reality that Trump, in accomplishing exactly what he wanted to do, in doing exactly what he told us he would do, no nukes for Iran, as simple and as direct as that, without suffering any casualties to the American people, to the American military, to our equipment. He succeeded. He succeeded extraordinarily well, above anyone's expectations. It was maintained as a secret, which means the Trump administration is one of the best administrations that we've seen in decades. There was no leaks. Here's this big, huge military operation that took months, and I believe since March, was something that we were working on, both independently and with Israel. Something that we've been working on, and no one leaked the information because it was important to America. It was important that we had that as our ace in the hole, our backup card if everything else fell apart. And everyone involved didn't say a word to anyone. And so a lot of people freaked out. Whether they are America First, MAGA, Republican, conservative, a lot of libertarians, a lot of people freaked out because they didn't understand the full nature of what we were doing or what we expected. And to a certain extent, I agree. I was in that scenario too. Obviously, I'm not clued into any secrets of the Trump administration. But I was able, as I said, we took away the emotion. We looked at the facts at hand. We looked at the history that's been going on. And we told you, without any hesitation, it's not World War III. It is a regional conflict. It won't last 2 years. Iran has lost. We told you those things. And we were correct. We were correct. I said Sunday that Donald Trump, just for the bombing of Iran, will get a bump in his approval rating of about 10 points. And I know polling from YouGov, which is questionable at best, some of the polling out there, they're saying, oh, no, but Trump is very negative. No one trusts him. I doubt that. I doubt that. If Americans had died, I would have said yes. If Iran was suddenly surging and their military was gearing up and they were coming over to America, I'd say yes. If we had seen Sunday night and Monday morning that there were 1,000 secret sleeper cells that had activated across America and our cities were burning, I'd agree with you. But that didn't happen. None of that happened. And now that there is a 12-day ceasefire because of Donald Trump, which will lead, we believe and expect, to an end of the war because of Donald Trump, then I think he's going to gain 20 points. His approval rating is going to shoot through the roof. He achieved everything that every American wants, that everyone in the world, every country in the world wanted Iran to not have nukes. They don't. Everyone in the world wanted that any war in the Middle East would end as quickly as possible between Iran and Israel. It did. That the United States would have limited input into direct fighting. Absolutely true. Trump achieved every goal that even the people who were afraid, who are isolationist, who are non-interventionist, the people who are, even the Democrats, cannot say Trump did everything he promised and everything we wanted. And everyone who says World War III, Trump broke his promises that he's bringing America into a land war against Iran in the Middle East. He's just like Obama. He's just like Biden. He's just like Clinton. Obviously, he's not. They're wrong. They lied to you. They were hyping you up, emotionally manipulating you because they want you to vote Democrat. Now, I'm not saying that's everyone, But a lot of the party leaders, people like Chuck Schumer, like AOC, a lot of these people were hyping you up. They were using you. Aren't you afraid? It's Orange Man bad. We told you he's Orange Man bad. This is going to go horrible. There's no way that this could work out. We're in a war and you can't get out of it. Oh my God, it's the end of everything. Vote Democrat. Lie. Complete lie. They were wrong. We told you that in analyzing the situation, they were wrong. That they were hyping this up. And now we see I'm right. They're wrong. And the degree to which, and I want to make sure it's clear. When I say there's a difference, there's a difference between, say, Kit Cabello, Hardlens Media. He's a leftist. He's a former Marine. He's a friend. Larry Sharp, former Marine, libertarian, also a friend. They were both very concerned about the scenario. They thought we were going into World War III because they have deep emotions about this, and their emotions were guiding them more than the clinical data. I'm less emotional about it. I look at the clinical data more than anything else. You often hear me and Larry argue all the time. I'm talking about when we talk about people voting. They're like, people vote because of emotions. I'm like, no, people vote because of facts. That's what I actually believe. People vote because of facts. Some emotion, mostly fact. They believe and understand certain things, not that they are emotional about them. Larry will tell you that people will vote because of emotions, and that's what the whole point of ads are. That's why people try to be likable, and I understand his reasoning. And that same empathy led some people to misunderstand this, and that's genuine. And as I have said Sunday, I've said in person to Larry, I've said it to Kit, I've said it on the program, I respect their honesty and their reasoning and their emotions. I don't agree with them, but I understand it. So I don't fault them. But when you look at Ilhan Omar and you look at AOC, you look at Bernie Sanders, Chuck Schumer, Pelosi, you look at the major parties, you look at the mainstream media and the way they manipulate this information, not giving full context to the American people or to the world, manipulating the way people feel so that you feel like the only answer you have is Orange Man bad, vote Democrat. That's because of their partisan goal. And I'm happy they were all wrong. Not Larry, not Kit Cabello. I'm not upset with them. I don't think they got it wrong. I think they were being genuine with the audience about their concern. They wanted the least amount of death for the most amount of people. And I can respect that. But there's a big difference between them and the mainstream news media and the Democratic Party and many of their operatives. And we're seeing that now. They told you, the mainstream news media, the Democrats, the progressives, told you this couldn't end. This was going to be World War III. Your life was over. They lied to you. They lied to you. I just wanted to add this live portion on, because this is the breaking news. And I think it was important. Now, I'm going to let you guys go. I thank everyone for checking this out and staying on with me to get the latest update. I want to hear my friend Larry Sharp, who's on the Sharp Way right now. I want to see what he has to say. I know he has the update. I want to hear what he's talking about. So I'm going to go check it out. And I invite you, come join me, the Sharp Way, Larry Sharp. See what he has to say. He's live right now. And I thank you for taking the time to be with me on Monday today to see this video. And please do like, share, subscribe. Always important. Like, share, subscribe. Because they try to suppress my voice because they want to manipulate you. Don't let them do it. Like, share, subscribe.